This is the one with cavemen, and shitty modern art, and clever people in straight-up blackface, and one of the, at once best and worst, Hotel impressions ever. It's called The Savages. Here we go. We're embarking on a voyage all through time and all through space,
encountering Daleks, Thalan, Ood, and the Cybertronic race.
Santarans look like taters, and Silurians all have wonky scales.
And the Doctor has a TARDIS, we're reviewing all his tales. Who back when? Reviewing all of who there is. Who back when?
Subscribe and rate on iTunes, please.
Episode by episode, we're trudging down this temporal road. Come join us on this odyssey. What other choice could there be than Who back when?
Who back when? Hello and welcome to episode C026 of Who Back When, the Doctor Who podcast. I am Ponkin. Yes, I am. And this is yet another solo mission. Sorry about that, ladies and gents. For those of you who are just tuning in, oh, Jesus Christ, people who have heard me say this before, they're going to be so sick and tired of me saying this, but you just glance over it, okay? As we have arrived at the missing episode heavy period of classic Doctor Who, and I don't want to subject my co-hosts to the arduous task of watching them or listening to them or whatever, I am doing all of these partially/wholly missing episodes as solo missions, and this is no exception. Fortunately, you'll be pleased to hear that we are slowly but surely running out of missing episodes, right? Perhaps a little bit more slowly than I'd like us to, and very soon this is going to be a group effort again. And furthermore, in the, good news column, the next episode is not a missing episode. In fact, the next episode is going to be a menage a trois, sort of, in a non-sexual way, because I will be joined by not one, but two co-hosts for the next one. That's going to be freaking amazeballs. Another apology for this episode. Not that that first one was an apology. Yeah, come on, seriously. You're going to listen to me ramble on about the Savages for like an hour and a half or something. I'm sure you can have a worse time, right? I mean, it can't be that bad. But anyway, kind of an apology. As you may have heard already, I have sort of lost my voice because we find ourselves in the pre-Christmas period where people just want to celebrate the fact that Christmas is coming up, and as a consequence, I have maybe partied a little bit too much and I've lost my voice. So I apologize. I've got some tea here. We're going to get through this, people. We will get through this. Let's jump into a B-scowl. Doc, Steven and Dodo, that's Dildo to you and me, materialize on some planets where two races are in conflict. One is super clever and sophisticated and appears to be confined to one single city, and the other is a bunch of cave people who appear to only live in one single cave. Life in the city is pretty cool, and our intrepid travelers are treated to various luxuries as they stroll along its corridors, but there's a dark reason for the affluence and the good health in the city, namely a sinister laboratory in which they steal the cavemen's life force. And obviously, our favorite Gallifreyan and his two companions do not approve. End of B-scowl. That pretty much sums it all up. You are welcome, people. Shall we jump into this? Let's do that. So this is a 4-part serial, all 4 of which are missing. So what I have watched here and what I'm reviewing is the loose cannon reconstruction of The Savages. I believe there is an audiobook as well. I have not listened to it. If you have, let us know. Write a mini review and add it to the comments on whobackwhen.com. And for all I know we've got a few listener minis already. I'm going to be reading them out at the end of this episode as per usual, but I haven't read them yet as per usual, and therefore I can't say. Very possibly someone has already done this. If they have and you haven't, you should follow suit and do so. Whatever. I've already said it. Send it to the website. Let's fucking get stuck into this goddamn serial. By the way, spoiler alert, I'm not a huge fan. Okie dokie. Part 1. So we pick up where we left off at the end of Gunfighters, with the Doc announcing that they've materialized in an age of peace and prosperity. That's a quote, and it's kind of weird because it's a little bit like he's saying it's an age without conflict and poor people, but I suppose it's idiomatic. No matter. They've materialized in a quarry somewhere, and there's a Flintstone-looking dude with a club approaching. Blam! Still images. Henceforth, pretty much only still images. We'll get to the exceptions. So they exit the TARDIS and Doc bumbles around what looks like a forest, even though, yes, they were just in a quarry. And he's doing so with what looks like a radar-equipped gramophone player in his hands. And it's already soundbite time. 343, what do you say? Soundbites?
Soundbite?
Soundbite.
The doctor has no idea of time.
What? It's time. You're Time Lord. Okay. So the doc's still taking readings, and he says his suspicions have been confirmed, and his companions are in for a surprise. And what exactly does that mean? He's already told them where they are, right? So, as in, is he saying that the surprising thing about all this is that he was right? Like, very possibly. I think that is exactly what he's saying. Anywho, two bearded people are spying on him. One of them looks very familiar. Can't remember. I don't even know if I ever made a note of the names of these actors, but there's one old dude and one young dude, and the younger one, he looks exactly like what's-his-face, Win Duffy in Justified, and he is brandishing a club, and we get a sound effect very much like in Space Museum when they noticed they weren't leaving any footprints. The older one of the two is called Chal, we find out later on. Can't remember what the younger one is called. Let's just go with Beardy Magoo and Justified for now. Yeah, what else? Justified tries to club the doc, doesn't, okay. And then Dodo, that's Dildo, sees another bearded man wearing animal skins, kind of primitive, and toting an axe, pretty sophisticated, and she immediately just screams. And Steve pops into frame to check what's up, but the man has now disappeared, and we realize that girls are still as incredulous as they were when Susie and Vaporub were aboard the TARDIS, because he basically just goes, I genuinely do not believe a single fucking word that comes out of your face. And then we get a little cutscene of Justified and Beardy Magoo theorizing that the doc's gadget is not, I quote, a light gun, so something is definitely off around here. Like, this isn't going to be a complete Flintstones episode, is essentially what we get from this. The doc is, however, satisfied with his tricorder readings and says to his onlookers to come out, but instead of the primitives, two dudes with, like, Frankel braces pop out, and they're not quite Robomen, but sort of, and they say that they've been waiting for him and are honored by his arrival. So why the nuts were they hiding, right? They were waiting for them to appear. They've been expecting them, but still they're hiding somewhere in the bushes. Anyway, so two things. Number one, the not Robomen, they've heard of the doc. He is known as, quote, the traveler from beyond space and time, or something like that. And that's a first. His reputation has preceded him, and now in New Who, we get this all the time. Like, people know about the Doctor, and I guess later on in Classic Who, this is going to happen as well, but I think for Classic Who, this is where it started. Like, people know about the Doc, and I guess there comes a point where you've just been bumbling around space and time so randomly and so frequently and for so long a time that obviously someone's going to have heard of you, right? Anyway, that's number one. Number two, they say that they anticipated his arrival because they've been tracking his course for many light years. What? The fact that there's the word years in light years does not mean dick. Like, it's a measurement of distance, dudes. How does that allow them to factor in when he's come from? Something great is about to happen, though, and those of you who have watched this one, or listened to the audiobook, I presume, will know what I'm talking about. It's not a plot point, it's not a plot twist, it's another soundbite. The Doctor calls his tricorder thingamajiggy...
This is my RV, you see, this is my reacting vibrator.
That's why he went off on his own. Like, he just wants some privacy so he can ram his tricorder up himself. Steven's got his dildo, Doc's got his vibrator. Who says this show isn't balanced? Okay, that's enough fun for now. The dudes are Edal, or Edal, who takes Doc to their city, and Exos, who goes to fetch Steve and Dildo. And then we get an action scene. The primitives, they start throwing spears at Dildo and Stevie Boy, who oddly take like a full minute before reacting and hiding behind the TARDIS. And I'm not giving this the emphasis that it deserves. It is so freaking weird. I can only guess at the directorial input here. Like, no, don't react yet, Pete, and what's your name again? Miss, Jackie. Yeah, just take a moment, take a minute, then stroll behind the TARDIS leisurely because the audience really wants to taste the tension in your reactionless eyes, please. So that happens, and meanwhile, more spears and primitives arrive. And then, as though they're not under attack, Exos, Mr. Stick-Up-His-Arse himself, Exorcist, Frankelbrace, Frank comes to pick them up, and as soon as he arrives in frame, there are no more spears, and Steve and Dildo no longer hide behind the TARDIS. Like, the attack just, it doesn't abate. It's like it never happens. They're just out in the open. They do not have a care in the world, okay? So, whatever. Dildo also goes, so this isn't the Iron Age, and the Exorcist says, by no means. But why would he know what the Iron Age is, or was, right? Like, there is no conceivable reason for him to know this. Okay, cut to the city, where Doc meets Jano, the head of the Council of Elders, the senior, who shows him a space-time map, which, can I just point out, is two-dimensional? and once again spouts some holy bullshit about tracking him through the ages and the cosmos. And Doc is now invited to join the Council of Elders because of his expertise in space-time. And before he's had a chance to reply, these two chicks appear and start stroking his groin. By which I mean, like, dress him in their traditional robes. No groin strokage apologies. Either way, the reason they do this, presumably, is because, as usual, all members of any alien race, they need to wear identical robes, right? And also, actually, I said this in the intro, but let's just take a moment to ponder something here. They've arrived on a planet. Like, you would assume that the whole planet is full of people, or at least sort of they're scattered across the planet relatively evenly, right? Like, just on the Earth, everyone doesn't live in one single spot. Like, people live a little bit all over the place, yeah? But not here, because, there are two different races on this planet, or two different civilizations anyway. We actually don't really find out if they're different races or whatever they are. Like, there's clearly two separate factions, but they each inhabit one single place each, and this is, like, that's the location equivalent of the fucking robes that these chicks are stroking his groin with, because, like, every elder of the sophisticated branch of whatever society, like that civilization, that race, whatever they are, they all have to wear the same shit, and they all have to live in the goddamn same place, because all of these people live in the same goddamn stupid city, while all the cave people, they all wear furs, and they live in one single goddamn cave that we're gonna see a little bit later on, I think, in episode 3. We're gonna get to that, don't worry about it. Either way, kind of feel like this is really annoying. Does not matter though, because now the Steve Meister and Dildo, they pop in, and they are presented with gifts as well. A bejeweled mirror for Dildo, which is going to come into play, because she is a girl, and girls only care about diamonds and their appearance, right? I believe we can all agree that that is exactly what the case is, at least in 1967 when this was made, right? Very sexist, as per usual. And for Stephen, a bejeweled dagger, because he's a man, and what better gift from a highly civilized society than a stabbing weapon, right? They start chatting, and we get a cutscene revealing some dissidence among the not-Robomen towards the Elders, which, oddly, my note here is completely wrong, because I kind of assumed that wasn't going to pan out at all, but it turns out, spoiler alert, it freaking will. Like, this alludes to a later plot point, and I have to say, even though that's kind of something that goes into any standard narrative structure nowadays, it didn't back in 1967's classic Who, and therefore is worthy of a golf applause. Well done, guys. Well done. Dissidence is also alluded to between the not-quite-Robomen and our humble protagonists, and in the meantime, the two savages from before, the two cavemen, Justified and Beardy Magoo, they are nearby, and they are now accompanied by this freaking smoking hot savagess named Nanina, and they're just looking on. Holy smokes. Pretty hot. So, blam. SD, they're now being guided through the city by some dude named Avon. Yes, like the skin cream manufacturer, and yes, like the chicklet publisher, and also a total babe named, I don't know what. Cannot remember. Only reason I mention this is she dreams of experiencing real things, so it seems all is not harmonious in the city after all. Is that gonna pan out? No, it's not. And one of the reasons she considers life there unreal is that even the atmosphere in the city is regulated by the Elders. Is that going to pan out? No, it's not. We also learn, however, that 1, there was a simple discovery that enabled this whole utopia, which we're told the Doc will discuss with the Elders, and we're going to cut to that in a little bit. And number 2, people are still freaking sexist douches, as Avon, out of freaking nowhere, tells the woman, actually, I think her name is Flower, to just be quiet. He just genuinely goes, shut up. Well, he says, be quiet. Okay, whatever. Meanwhile, in what is termed the Scrubland, Nanina is bobbing around in a little Raquel Welch number when she spots Frank, aka Exos. And this is so weird because a 4-minute scene follows in which she hides, then runs off. Turns out she's heading towards him after all, so she turns around and runs off, but it turns out she's still heading towards him, yada yada yada. And presumably the logistics of this scene made sense back in the day, but unfortunately now, maybe with the footage or the still images that were actually available to the recon, or to I was about to say Big Finish there, to Loose Cannon, it just kind of doesn't, but you have to make allowances. Long story short, Frank fires his light gun at her, which transpires is like a tractor beam, and not as I'd hope, a defabricator like in Bad Wolf. So she's trapped in this ray, and Beardy Magoo and Justified, actually let's just call him Fred Flintstone, they've been watching all along and like jacking it. They conclude that she's been captured. Shazam, cut back to the city where the lead elder, the senior of before, who, did I say this by the way? He is in shameless blackface, like they all are, or at the very least the elders are. I don't think Avon was, but I think pretty much everyone else in the city is just in blackface. It is distinctly offensive, right? He is explaining the secret to the success of their utopia, and that is, they take the life energy from lesser beings and transmit it into themselves. Now there are two things that make zero effing sense here. Number one, that might explain why everyone's healthy and sometimes good looking, but it doesn't explain their intellect or social order. Spoiler alert, they're tapping the savages for life energy, okay? So surely that would only give them strength, not an increased intellectual capacity, okay? I think that makes perfect sense there. Number two, why, if the elders are so clever and scientifically advanced and they've been waiting to hobnob with a dock hammer on an intellectual and scientific plane far higher than anyone else is capable of, why does the elder speak in uncertain metaphors? You know, he doesn't say something to the effect of, by administering endoplasmatic radiation to the chromosomal follicles, we gain beta wave pulses that rejuvenate our subcellular whatsits. He just goes, it's like we can take the life energy itself and shove it up ourselves. It's any sentence in best-selling chick novel You Had Me at Hello, published by, wait for it, Avon. Not kidding, it's all similes. Turn it into a drinking game, it's doable, I've done it. Anyway, I'm sure it's a great book. Where was I? Right, this makes no sense. They might as well be speaking to Dildo, right? But they aren't. They're speaking to the doc. They shouldn't have to simplify it. Doesn't matter. Speaking of Dildo, though, we cut back to her, Stevie, Chicklet, and Flower. And we get another hint at Flower's interior dismay. Although she says she wants for nothing in the city, she adds with a bit of a frown that they're not allowed outside. And then they pop off into another room, but through a window, Dildo spots Exos leading Nanina through some heavy gates. And she tries to tell Stevie Boy about this, but because she's a woman in 1967, he just shakes his head and goes, now, Dildo, you're just full of all kinds of shit, aren't you? And kablamo, we cut to a lab where some scientist has all but depleted a savage of energy and then receives a new subject in the form of Nanina. So Exos tells him he was delayed by the strangers, i.e. Doc and Co, blah 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 blah, and he adds that there's something strange about them. And in my notes, by the way, I've now added, I'm guessing that they're going to strap our heroes to the energy transfer device at some point. That's a quote from my fucking notes, and god damn it, I wish I could prove that to you, because I freaking got that totally right. Spoiler alert. Anyway, we see that the savage they just tapped, for energy, is staggering down a corridor back to his cell. Or actually, wait, hang on, why am I saying back to his cell? Not back to his cell, like out of whatever, like the gates that lead out, right? So now we know they don't kill them. They keep them alive for future energy transfers, basically. That's what it is, right? So he's gonna be let out, he's gonna recuperate them, they're gonna bring him back in, tap him for more energy. It's like that creepy basement in The Road, you know? So anyway, whatever, they get started on Nanina, and we briefly cut back to SD, and Steve's just pounding one off to how great the city is. He just cannot get enough of the art on the walls and the architecture and just like how wonderful and jolly everything is in there. He just hasn't picked up on anything that Flower's been saying. Dildo, meanwhile, is the sensible companion here, and she follows Exos through a doorway and is now locked in somewhere, like she's in this corridor that leads from the outside to the laboratory and vice versa. Oh, and in my notes I've said she's clearly to be caught and tapped for energy. Spoiler alert, I was wrong about that one. Hey, you know what? You can't win them all. It's soundbite time. Jano is still speaking to Doc, and it's as though they've just paused since we last saw them, because their conversation really hasn't progressed at all. Anyway, I want to soundbite a thing Jano says here. Soundbites. Soundbites. Thank you, Sheila. Sound bites.
Doctor, do you realize that with our knowledge we can make the brave man braver, the wise man wiser, the strong man stronger? We can make the beautiful girl more beautiful still. You will see the advantages of that in the perfection of our race.
Okay, A, how the fuck does that work then, guy? B, could this be any more sexist? And C, what exactly do you mean by you'll see the benefits of that, Jano? Because it sounds a little bit like there's a Vaseline girl waiting in Doc's chambers. And then we end the episode on Dildo in the corridor screaming as the lumbering savage approaches her. He's on his way out, he's on his way towards her. Holy shitting balls, it is scary as hell, thinks Dildo. End of episode 1. Episode 2. Holy crap, I didn't say this about... Okay. Alright. Shit, I've made a note here about episode 2. I completely forgot to bring this up for episode 1. Alright, so, this is a 4-parter. Part 1 is called Part 1. part 2 is called, not part 2, it's called episode 2. So it goes part 1, episode 2, and then episode 3 and episode 4. But whatever, I at the time I thought this was hilarious enough to mention in my notes and I just completely forgot about it. I'm sorry, I'm not that organized. Alright, end of part 1, episode 2, Kabalamatron. Not only does Dildo not scream this time as she sees the savage lumber in her direction, he's not heading in her direction in the first place now. It feels like that's pretty fundamental as far as continuity goes. So, you know, what the hell, guys? And what she does instead is help him. Like, she helps him to his feet and through these massive doors that lead out, and outside which she sees Betty Magoo and Fred Flintstone, aka Justified, waiting, because clearly they, like, this dude and the hottie wrapped in leather and fur Nanina, are the only freaking savages the producers cared to cast in this show, right? So, whatever. The faint savage staggers out, the doors close, and we get the kind of unnecessarily melancholy violin music that you'd hear during pensive moments of the Jeremy Brett Sherlock Holmes series, because Dildo has now they-lived the whole scenario and knows the civilized pricks who live in the city to be massive a-holes, right? Cut to torture porn. Nanina is strapped to a gurney inside some sort of pod in the lab. She is crying, and she is pleading and begging the scientist to stop. And this is horrific. Like, this is fuck. Okay, I have not been super serious up to this point in the review, but holy crap, there is no way you can deny that this is genuinely horrific to watch. Not because it's like, oh no, they're gonna take her energy because, you know, that's just nonsense. But because she's delivering her angst and terror incredibly well. And it's very realistically done. Like, I mean, she sounds genuinely terrified and just full of sadness. And there's something very disturbing about watching a scene in a goddamn family show, by the way, about a very scantily clad and tied up woman who's sobbing and begging to be let go, while guys in lab coats are essentially about to violate her. There is even, I kid you not, there is even an upskirt shot in this scene. It is just so fucking wrong on so many levels. She might as well be wearing a gas mask and have like electrodes stuck to her nipples. Gross. Then finally it stops, several minutes later, and we get an endless montage of the pod filling up with smoke and beginning to sap her life energy while, check this out, Dildo furtively approaches. Shazam. Stevie Boy is still looking for Dildo. Did I say that before, by the way? He finally stopped jacking it to how great the city is and noticed that she was missing. Chicklet and Hippie Girl, they suggest she may be playing hide and seek. Like a fucking child, by the way. And we get this nugget of a soundbite from Steve Rooney. Hit me, Sheila. Soundbite.
Soundbite?
Soundbite.
Not even Dodo would be as stupid as that.
Not even Dodo would be as stupid as that. That is great. Okay. He demonstrates just a formidable understanding of his, co-companion. Okay, cutscene alert. Steve now bursts into the main hall again where Doc's hearing all about the energy zapping from Jano. And Steve Meister tells Doc about Dildo, and Doc says something to the effect of, oh, she can take care of herself. I actually couldn't give a small shit. So Steve is shown the secret corridor by Edal or Frankelbrace or whatever. Although I'm not sure why, because Frankelbrace, like, he won't allow Steve down it. Like, he basically just goes, oh, wait, she went down there? Oh, well, you know what? I guess she's dead then. Alright, la 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 la. And then he practically wants to trudge along, right? That's it. But it makes no sense. Meanwhile, Dildo's now in the lab. She gets spotted and apprehended by a couple of lab assistants who apparently had no idea the greatest heroes in their entire civilization had arrived in the city because they assumed Dildo to be a savage, even though she's not wearing furs. So obviously what I'd anticipated in the beginning is about to come to pass, right? Wrong. Actually, I said that I was wrong before, didn't I? Yeah, so no spoiler alert there. She's not gonna be sapped for energy. But in the plus column, we get another line that makes, wait for it, no sense whatsoever. One of the assistants tells the head scientist dude, hey, guy, we've got a savage here, but weirdly, she's resisting. Fighting even. How the hell is this odd to you? Like, we had 2 full minutes of Nanina crying, no, stop, over and over again. We had another guy, the stumbly one from before, who wasn't exactly up for it either. And if the outsiders never resisted, why would they need armed guards with fucking Frankels on their noggins to bring them in? They'd just be lining up to enter the lab otherwise. Fuck this lab assistant. Anyway, Dildo is basically threatening to vandalize the lab equipment unless they let her go. And it turns out whatever gadget she's picked up or is standing next to could actually kill them all if it were smashed. Doesn't seem very safe to me. Oh, you know what? Here's this thing that's so volatile it could kill everyone if it broke. Cool. Is it secured in a bunker or at least behind shatterproof glass or something? Nope. But it's sturdy, right? Well, you know, yeah, a girl could easily smash it to bits with her weak 1960s hands, but I don't think we ought to reinforce it or anything. Yeah, good point. Thanks, man. You're welcome. What an absolutely dumbass construction. Oh, and by the way, does this pan out? Like, is there something there that they can later on break and therefore, like, in that manner blow up the lab or part of the city or the entire city or whatever? No, it does not. This is never brought up again. We have this one mention of something that can potentially detonate the source of all evil in this episode, but we're never going to make use of that ever again. What a stupid scene. Alright. So, Edal, the not Roboman, he arrives, is quite upset and wants to know how much Dildo has seen. But why does it matter? The energy sapping is no secret. Actually, you know what? Why did Chicklet and Flower not want to tell her before? Jano is totally open about it. I mean, he has brought the Doctor into his fold, the Doctor and his companions into this fold, and he's just sharing this with them completely openly. There is no secret. Why would Edal go, oh wait, hang on, if she might know too much? So Edal now escorts Dildo back to Stevie, and we learn that not Raquel Welch had excessive amounts of life energy drained out of her body. She's practically lifeless, and did I mention this by the way? Like, she's hardly wearing anything at all. So Chicklet, Flower, Stevie, and Edal, I think, they now collectively declare Dildo a stupid little girl and convince her that what she saw was a hospital. And she disagrees because A, it was so sterile, that's a quote, and B, it felt inhuman, that's another quote. What? Dildo, listen up. A, you want a hospital to be sterile, okay? And B, of course it felt inhuman because you're not among humans. You are on another planet altogether, you freaking racist. We don't know which planet, but there certainly isn't Earth. Everything is inhuman, and I know we've talked about this on Who Back When before, like the whole thing where if you're humanoid in classic Doctor Who, you can be referred to as a human and no one's gonna think that you're a racist for doing so. And sweet buttery Moses, we're gonna come up to something like that in a little bit. Okay, I'm not gonna spoil that anymore. You will hear that in just a moment. Alright. The outcome of all this is that Chicklet and, actually I've changed my mind, let's call her Peaches. Peaches and, what's his face, Avon, they're going to face the equivalent of a court-martial for letting Dildo find out about the lab. Again, if that's such a crime, then I hate to tell you guys, but perhaps you should consider court-martialing Jano and all of your other leaders because they were bragging about the damn thing to Doc before. Still, a Frankel Brace shows up and he light beams Chicklet and Peaches. I wonder, is this going to pan out? You know, I'm not even going to tell you if it's going to pan out. I'm going to leave you to guess. Whatever. Cut to not Raquel Welch being carried down the corridor, and as though she hasn't suffered enough indignity, her dress is pulled up throughout the entire corridor scene. So we actually get to see her perfectly formed buttocks. Oh, and you know what? It is such a shame that she was so sad before, because otherwise this would be so hot. And Mr. Skin, screenshot, 10 minutes and 7 seconds in. Okay, so the three travelers, they're now reunited, and Doc tells Jano some bullshit fairy tale about wanting to share some documents with him, like some documents of his about time travel or something. And he and Stevie, Doc and Stevie that is, they're now going to go get the documents from the TARDIS and bring them back, and they want Dildo to come with them so that they don't lose sight of her again. And that's the official story, and clearly this is just a ruse, but it's fine, I'm okay with that, and they leave. Where it's not fine, however, is where Jano tells Edal to then follow them because perhaps Dildo suspects something now, and just perhaps the Doc isn't cool with the whole idea of robbing the outsiders of their energy. Well, you know what, Jano, you think maybe you shouldn't have told him all about it then? Like, maybe you could have vetted him first? In fact, I think Jano may need an energy top-up in the lab because clearly his logical reasoning is not up to scratch. Oh, getting really upset here. It's soundbite time though. Doc and Co encounter Stumbly Savage lying alone on the ground outside, and the Doctor says,
They've discovered a way of extracting life's force from human beings and absorbing it into themselves.
Wait, what now? Are they humans? They're not. I know this. This is what I meant before. I mean, and you know what? Let's set aside for a moment the fact that Beatty Magoo and Fred Flintstone, aka Justified, like, they apparently didn't give a shit about Mr. Stumbly Savage when he was released because they just left him there, right? And focus on the fact that this is another case of that phenomenon. I know I've pointed this out on the show before. I think it may have been in The Keys of Marinus. I may be misremembering that. But point is, for some reason, humanoid aliens are sometimes referred to as humans, and quite possibly in a lot of classic sci-fi in general, not just in Doctor Who. And even though that's totally racist, the aliens in question, they do not react. In this case, fine, Mr. Stumbly isn't lucid enough to react, but Steve and Dildo, they head back to the TARDIS, and suddenly Edal pops up, and Doc tells him this.
You still waste time on this creature?
This human beings. They are men, human beings, like you and me. You're behaving in a rather subhuman fashion.
That's ridiculous. And this extends to related phrases as well, by the way. Like Dildo before saying the lab was inhuman, right? Okay, let's move on. Adal takes the doc back to the city. Stevesy and Dildo return with medicine for Mr. Stumbly. Actually, he has a name. Hang on, I'm checking my notes. Wilder. His name is Wilder, which is a great name for a savage, by the way. Alright, where was I? So they return with meds that they give to Wilder. Then Fred Flintstone and Biddy Magoo, they pop into frame with spears and surprise, Wilder tells them not to hurt Stevesy and Dildo, and that their friend, the doctor, was taken. And then back to the other set of this production, i.e. the city, Balam, where I want to pop in another Doctor soundbite. He says,
Oppose you? Indeed, I am going to oppose you. Just in the same way that I opposed the Daleks.
And this isn't the first time we've had a reference to the Daleks in a non-Dalek serial, but I'm pretty sure you can count the occasions on your testicles. You guys have 3 nuts too, right? No, but seriously, this happens loads in Doctor Who now, but it didn't back then because it was still relatively new. The more established it gets, the more often we get this kind of cross-referencing, and I think that obviously that makes perfect logical sense. But anyone want to tell me where else this has happened? I can only think of the actual Dalek shell in the Space Museum now, but I'm sure there's a mention of Daleks elsewhere as well. Let's make this interactive. If you can think of another episode or another serial where that's happened, pop that comment on the website. Tell me on Twitter as well if you like, but please, for the love of all that is good and pure in the universe, pop that comment on the website. Anyway, we get another one of these now.
It is most unscientific. You are standing in the way of human progress.
Human progress, sir.
And then the Doctor is led away, and we get a cutscene back with Dildo, Stevesy, and the Savages, and one of the latter explains that the Doc's heading for the room with the great vats, aka the lab, where he will become like them. And this is just clearly the moral of the story here, and according to my notes, which I'm not going to say that I was wrong, because I wasn't completely wrong. I guess I wasn't completely proven right either, but okay, listen to this and make up your minds for yourselves. According to my notes, this is what I've written. It must be that the Savages could easily be living in the city and are only savages because the city dwellers have zapped their intellect. And to a certain degree, I was right about that, but I don't know. Well, we'll see. Anyway, true enough, the Doc is in the lab and quite surprised to find that he is going to be the subject of their next experiment. Let's put a pin in that, he is quite surprised. Also noteworthy is that the lab guy, the fellow scientist, objects to performing the procedure on another higher life form. Does that pan out? Shall we put a pin in that? I don't even think we need to put a pin in that because he clearly does not object at all very, very soon. It certainly doesn't stop him from going forward with the experiments. Shazam. We end the episode on, I kid you not, a 3-minute scene of them sucking a chunk of life force from the Doctor. Cliffhanger, and holy smokes, if the producers really wanted to get rid of Hartnell, this would have been a sad but kind of appropriate moment to regenerate the Doc. You know, 1 life's worth is subtracted from his body. They could have a spectacular scene where he regenerates inside their pod and just lights up the lab, and then out plops Troughton playing the flute and giving them all the wanker sign. No dice though, Hartnell is here to stay for a bit. End of episode 2. Episode 3, entitled Episode 3. And the Doctor is still being energy sapped. And let's just point out the process is not quite complete yet. That is to say, it is completed seconds later, just as freaking Jano arrives and goes, I was told you did a marvelous job sapping the Doc's energy. But how the shit did he know that? Like, this is just sloppy. I mean, I would have rather he arrived to see how it was going and then congratulated the scientist, Senta, I think his name is, on a job well done, instead of waiting in the wings with a shit excuse like a flipping precog at a primary school play. But anyway, yes, the Doc has now been sapped, and Jano tells the guard, what's his face again? Frankelbrace. Frank. Is that what I called him? I can't remember. Let's just call him Frank. I'm drawing a total blank here. He tells him, go hunt down Stevesy and Dildo so that they can be zapparoonied as well. Cut to Stevesy and Dildo, who are chatting with the cavemen, and we learn a few things here. Column A, they actually do live in caves. Yeah? Into which, we are told, the city guards won't go for fear of fuck knows what. Let's put a pin in that. Column B, the cavemen have deduced that the guards are after Stevesy and Dildo, and the way that they've done this is actually pretty clever. They say the guards, they're patrolling as per usual, they're heading in their direction, but they're letting all the cavemen go. They're not actually arresting anyone. Ipso facto, as a matter of logical consequence, they must be after someone else, id est, Stevesy and Dildo. That is pretty clever and not at all caveman-like, alright? Just want to point that out. And column C, Chal, one of the cavemen, the old guy, Beardy Magoo, he says that when they meet the Dockhammer again, he will not be the same anymore. Because once you've been through the lab, they leave you an empty shell of a man, I think he says. Cut back to the lab, where Jano now orders the scientist to prep for the transference of all of the energy they just ripped out of the Dockmeister. Into where? Into him. Jano. Even though it is inferred that normally that amount of energy would be transferred into a number of recipients. Because, Jano says, it wouldn't be right to jeopardize anyone else. But fact of the matter is, he's just a selfish dick, and his argument isn't worth the weight of his, I presume, minuscule Lilliputian penis, because surely he could, in that case, just have a tiny and, regular-sized portion of that energy transferred into himself. He doesn't need all of it. And the scientist, let's go back to that pin. Actually, you know what? We didn't drop a pin deliberately. We should have, because then we could have gone back to it. That scientist, he does not object at all. And, I'm gonna combine two different pins here. He doesn't object at all, even though, if the experiment is a failure, right, which is the argument that Jano is using, there's a risk of this being a complete failure, I can't risk anyone else's health, i.e., perform the whole thing on me, but if that experiment is a failure, then they'll have wasted all of the Doctor's energy. Well, at least all the Doctor's energy, all of the energy that they've just taken from him. The scientist is cool with this. Bullshit. That's what this is. Bullshit. Ugh. Okay. Cut to Frank and another guard, I genuinely do not remember their names now. Idal, that's the guy, walking around the scrublands with their rebonkulous headgear and their massive, we're not overcompensating for anything sized light guns. And they're approaching the caves outside which Stevesy, Dildo, Fred Flintstone and Beardy Magoo are currently just sort of chilling. And Fred Flintstone, aka Justified, he wants them to just hand over Steve Rooney and the Dildomatron, but Beardy Magoo lays down the law. So he and the rest of the good guys, sans Flintstone, now go into the cave. And as they do, we get a gratuitous shot of Nanina's sexy legs on a staircase, because yeah, this is only a hole in a large body of rock when viewed from the outside, but inside, it's no longer just a cave. It is a temple, and apparently quite beautiful. Unfortunately, obviously this is a lost episode, we can only, you kind of have to take the caption's word for it, if that makes any sense. It turns out, the cavemen's ancestors, they were rather artistic, but due to their experiences in the city laboratory, they are no longer able to create anything of that sort anymore, right? Yawn. Speeding through this now. The guards arrive, they light ray Fred Flintstone, who just immediately squeals on our protagonists, and then the bad guys, let's get back to that pin, they enter the cave temple thingy. So clearly there was no problem, the whole, we are safe in the cave, they never come in here thing, where the guards, they have to patrol the area and only ever kidnap cavemen who are out and about, getting food. That's bullshit. They just have to trudge down the staircase into this cave temple thingy and get them, and that's it. That wouldn't be a problem. Or what would make much more sense is if the guards would just keep them locked up in fucking cells by the lab. Doesn't that make more sense? Why would you wouldn't even need to employ guards. You're a sophisticated intellectual society. Why do you even have people whose sole raison d'etre is to kidnap people, or to kidnap cavemen? This makes no sense whatsoever. You should be out finger painting, not kidnapping birds in really sexy fur outfits. What fucking ever. Sorry, I'm getting so riled up by this. Okay, where was I? Beardy Chalface, whatever his name is. Chal. Obviously. He leads the travelers down one of several passageways, and this is now actually sort of a cave. And in the meantime, the soldiers arrive. One of them, it's Exos. He enters, threatens the other cave dwellers to tell them which passageway they went down, and one of them just shits all over himself and tells them the truth. And Nanina immediately and sexily slithers into frame and tells him, no more HJs for you, Buster, because you betrayed them. And several minutes of nothing major happening later. Several minutes. The soldier shouts down the passageway, which, by the way, is a freaking cul-de-sac, which Beardy Goddamn Magoo knew all along. Whatever. He shouts down the passageway, and Stephen, trying to keep a low profile, shouts back, "Come and get us, soldier boy!" Not a lie, he calls him soldier boy.
Come on, soldier boy!
And Steven now devises a plan and takes Dildo's mirror, thank God that came into play, and then uses it to reflect the light from the soldier's, Exhaust, that's his name, from Exhaust's light gun back at him, and subsequently take him prisoner, which the cave people all think is like mega impressive and irrefutable proof that A, Steve Z has nuts of solid rock, and B, that he and Dildo are in fact gods. Holy fuck, I should be putting a pin into this, but there's no point because there's nothing later on to, like, actively contradict it that we can then use to refer back to this pin. But let's just make something clear that is never brought up again. They are declared deities in one instance, halfway through episode 3, and that by the end of episode 4, no one has ever mentioned this again. It is so stupid. It is so completely irrelevant. Oh, and frustrating. Absolutely frustrating. And you know what? I really need to get the trope archive set up on whobackwen.com because episodes where Doc and Co are considered gods is something else to track, methinks. Jano is having the energy splooged into his body now by putting on a Breaking Bad style hazmat suit and stepping into some bubbling gloop up to groin level. And then we get another freaking science montage. And this is what, the third one in as many episodes, I think. Anyway, Beatty Magoo is now leading SD to the city. And we stay in the cave temple for a bit, while Flintstone tries to straight up home run Exhaust's cranium. Like he's the so-called Bear Jew from Inglourious Bastards. But not Raquel Welch stops him and then tends to Exhaust's wounds. And we get a glimpse of understanding and remorse in Exhaust's face as he asks her, why did you save me? You know, because he was the one who led her to the lab earlier that day, you know, in episode 1. So, alright, that's probably gonna pan out. Yes, it will. Spoiler alert. Over at the city gates, meanwhile, Steve Z light guns another guard, Dodo takes his light gun, and Beatty Magoo quite effectively maneuvers this keypad and opens the gates for them. I thought he was a caveman, but that's okay. I guess he can open gates now, like electronic gates. Oh, and we learn another thing. If you look straight at the light of the light gun, you're not just, like, tractor beamed. You are just knocked out, like totally KO'd for a good long while, which also makes no sense because isn't that exactly what people have been doing all along? Whatever. Jano has now completed his energy absorption, but is just standing around, sort of stunned and silent, and something's very different about him now, and when the scientist starts to speak with him, Jano responds as such. Soundbite.
What's all the fuss about? I'm quite all right. The trouble with you people on this planet is that you don't understand...
Yep, Jano now speaks like the Doctor. He's doing a William Hartnell impersonation, occasionally stopping to go, what the shit is wrong with my brain? And like returning to his Jano self. But the Doc in him suddenly appears and sort of takes control of him. In fact, at one point, he even tries to smash the equipment in the lab. But then Jano, at the very last moment, regains control and stops himself from doing this. Idal and the scientist, meanwhile, they're watching SD on some CCTV and they lure them into a trap by, what in their mind is like temporarily releasing the Doctor, he's just behaving like a mindless zombie, basically, because he's weak, or weakened from the energy sapping thingamajiggy. And their trap, it totally works, because while Steve Z and Dildo take care of the Doctor, the guards now lock them in and start pumping some kind of gas into their part of the corridor. Can't remember what kind of gas it was. I think it was actually lethal gas, which, I may be misremembering that, but as I recall, it was lethal gas, and clearly it can't be that because they need them later on. So I'm actually, you know what? Fuck it, I am probably misremembering that. It must be like some sort of anesthetic. Okay, we end the episode on the cliffhanger of them coughing their lungs out while Jano listens in on a radio, effing undoubtedly about to intervene because the Doc and him won't let, quote-unquote, his friends be hurt, right? End of episode 3. Episode 4, entitled, Episode 4. And they're coughing like crazy, and Dodo throws down her gun like an absolute idiot when suddenly Jano remotely opens the gates again, allowing them to escape. And in fact, on a tannoy, he even says, keep the gun and escape, my boy, or something to that effect. So now everyone knows that he did it. They're now going through the Scrobblins now, dragging the zombified Doc around until they encounter Chow and decide that the safest thing to do now is to take him to the cave. What the hell? Why is that the safest thing? They said before that the guards never dare enter the caves, which was bullshit, because Exhauster had no compunctions whatsoever about entering it. So why would anyone else? And why don't Steve and Dildo just go back to the TARDIS? Surely that would be the safest thing. It's not like it's that far away either, right? I don't think so. Okay, so now the guards are steadily approaching, and they have to make a decision, so they make a really rubbish one, and Dildo and Chal take him to the cave, while Steve Z sticks around to stall the guards, who, by the way, are being led by Jano, who now only intermittently does his relatively spot-on Hartnell impression. And even the guards recognize that they could have gone back to their spaceship, as they put it, the spaceship, not the time machine. But no dice, Holmeslice. They all head towards the cave. It makes no sense. Alright, so we get a couple of seconds of actual video footage here as Steve Z takes cover behind a rock as the guards approach. And did I say this before? I'm not sure. I don't think I did. Maybe I did. If I did, ignore this. But we got a couple of seconds of actual video footage earlier as well, at the end of episode 3 when SD were entering the corridor into the city. Whatever. We did anyway. Just take my word for it. Steve Z now takes care of one of the guards. Boom. Done. And we get a really crap firefight between Edal and Steve Z. Shamalama Ding Dong, let's head back to the cave where Tor, aka Fred Flintstone, aka Justified, is about to strike Nanina in the face with a club for helping the enemy. That's Exos. When suddenly Chal, aka Beady Magoo, arrives with Dildo and the Dockmeister and are about to be helped inside. And then Steve Z arrives and shouts, I think we need to soundbite the whole thing. Like the whole interlocution twixt Steve Z and Dildo face. Sound bite.
Give him some of those capsules!
Which capsules?
Those that we gave to the savage!
Yes, I forgot.
That's hilarious. Truth be told, I'd forgotten about the capsules as well. And in fact, most of us probably had. In fact, including the writer. Or, well, I guess rather, the writer must have known that everyone had forgotten about him as well, because this is, I dare say, a fairly mediocre script, and there's no way you can't recognize that even if you penned the damn thing, which must be why this literal reminder was baked into it. Ridiculous. Anyway, Steve Z is about to blast the shit out of Jano with his non-lethal weapon that hardly causes any damage whatsoever, when Doc stops him and says Jano is not to be hurt, which ultimately means that Jano and company, they just managed to escape. And then we get another few seconds of footage, now of Doc snapping out of it properly and exclaiming that he is not going to leave before they have destroyed the laboratory. So now we have an actual goal, like this is the end goal of the episode. Exciting stuff. Back in the city, Edal now tells the scientists and the other elders that Jano has changed, and he basically just rats him out completely. Shazam! Cut back to the cave as Jano arrives to speak with Doc and Co. And this is where we're treated to a whole other smorgasbord of utter bloody twaddle. Check this out. Doc says he basically planned this all along. He knew that Jano was going to take all of his energy, and the reason he knew that was that Jano wasn't the kind of person who'd risk his people's health in, as he puts it, an unknown experiment. But, A, we already concluded that Jano was a selfish dickhole and not altruistic or self-sacrificing at all. And B, if it weren't an unknown, it wouldn't be much of an experiment, now would it? Unknown experiment, my ass. Anyway, the Doc's plan, allegedly, was that Jano absorb not only his intellect, but his conscience as well, which apparently is exactly what happens. So now Jano is going to help the so-called savages because he feels bad about all the crimes that his people committed against them, right? Exos, who is still there in the cave with them, doesn't like the sound of that at all, and manages to escape somehow, and after him runs Nanina. And ridiculously, she catches up to him, and manages to appeal to his conscience. And let's face it, she's pretty hot, and Exorce has probably noticed her killer legs. So now he's a, let's call it a traitor for the right cause as well? Yeah, I think so. I think that makes sense. In fact, he now returns to the lab, and while Edal is telling everyone that Jano's a shitbag, Exos just goes, guys, I am sure I have no idea what you're talking about. Blam. Enter Jano with his fake prisoners. He is now pretending to still be a bad guy and have somehow single-handedly triumphed over everyone. So he enters with the following fake prisoners, aka everyone of significance whom we've encountered thus far, i.e. the Dockmeister, Steve Z, Dildo, Beady Magoo, Fred Flintstone, and not Raquel Welch. So everyone who is anywhere else, we pretty much don't care about. Edal is arrested and led away. It will not pan out. And then Jano tries to reason with the scientist, Centaur, that guy, that he must destroy the lab. And Centaur refuses to, and so, instead, what we get is a 2-minute scene of everyone else just kicking the proverbial shit out of the lab. You were gonna be so sophisticated and moralistic and just firmly superglued onto your high horse so that you can just solve this whole thing through dialogue. You've already compelled the leader of this other civilization to join your cause by, I guess, subjecting him genetically or energetically to your immoral values, Doctor. But instead, in the end, what you do is beat the crap out of some computers. That's it. Alright, Ed Al now comes back, even though he was taken prisoner and carted off to some cell. He's now back, and still armed, makes no sense, and he tries to stop them, but is knocked out by Steve Z's light gun, that one presumes, because we learned before that they could knock people out with him, whatever. He doesn't, he no longer fights back, right? And when the dust has finally settled, a couple of minutes later, something I neither knew nor had come to expect transpired. Beatty Magoo and Jano both say that they want Steve Rooney to stay and mediate peace between the two people. And for no reason other than that his contract must have expired, the doc says something to the effect of, literally no one else in the world could possibly do it but you, my boy. Whereupon Steve decides to stay on this planet, the name of which still remains a fucking mystery to us. What a goddamn waste. Dildo runs up to him, and you know what, I'm so pleased we actually still have those couple of seconds of footage left to behold, because, oh, and by the way, as we do the few seconds when the doc says goodbye to him as well, and they shake hands, I'm at a loss for words here. Like, this scene got me genuinely emotional.
Well, I must say, young man, I'm very proud of you. Doctor, I don't know if I know, my boy. Well, go on, you mustn't keep them waiting. Goodbye, Doctor. Goodbye, Stephen, and good luck.
Farewell, Stephen, Steve Rooney, Steve Z, Stevie Boy, Steve Meister. You were the S in SD, and ever since you shed your teddy bear, you've been one heck of a companion. And you know what? A pretty decent surrogate Ian as well. I think I am actually going to miss you. Deep sigh. Doc and Dildo leave the lab, where all of a sudden, for no discernible reason whatsoever, the equipment starts making all these noises. And they return to the TARDIS, they dematerialize, and we get the text plate, next week, The War Machines. Which, by the way, is a serial that I'm not going to be recording on my own. I think I may have said this in the beginning. If I did, ignore this. But, in fact, I'm going to be joined by no less than 2 people for that one. I can't remember if we've already said which 2 people on the show, but in case we haven't, I'm going to keep stum and maintain the surprise. Anyway, End of the Savages. Review. Right, so I actually had to pause the recording there and have a think about how to rate this serial. There are some things about it that are great, and then there are tons of things about it that are indisputable garbage. Ipso facto, what I've done is I've made a list of bullet points in the pro and the contra columns respectively, and thus I have reached a tentative conclusion in terms of its rating, but let's journey there together, shall we, ladies and gentlemen? Yes, we shall. Here we go. The positives. The moral of the story. Conceptually, I am totally on board with this, and I think for a family show, it teaches a valuable lesson on equality. However, I can't help but feel that the fact that the perpetrators of the aforementioned injustices are portrayed in blackface slightly undermines the argument. Yeah, I think so. Next bullet point. The acting. I'm gonna say I don't think anyone delivered a particularly poor acting job here. I don't think there were even any doctor line stumbles in this one.
I want you to go to the emergency cabinet.
Hence, kudos all around. Next up, the companions. Steve Z and Dildo, they're doing a pretty great job here. Even though Dildo is predictably stupid in some scenes, and despite Steve Rooney occasionally being revoltingly sexist, those are both products of the time. And in addition to that, both companions have moments of total take-chargeness. In fact, it's pretty much just Dildo, I feel, who gets to be the clever one in this serial, while Steve Z, on the other hand, turns into the action hero and single-handedly wields this future weapon that he's never held in his hands before, more effectively, in fact, than an entire force of trained, I'll pop in a Terry Nationism here, space guards, you know? So yeah, well done, companions. Next up, the main sci-fi element. Yep, again fairly high concept sci-fi. A lab in which certain energies are drawn out of living beings and transferred through bubbling conduits into another. Very cool. Seriously, very cool. And even the design of it all. Like, it could have all been this really naff thing where they shine a light at both patients and we hear some wibbly-wobbly sound effects and that's it. But instead, we get a smoke-filled pod and a dude in a hazmat suit stepping into some bubbling techno-gloop. And it's pretty awesome. Next bullet point. Nanina, not Raquel Welch. I hate to admit it, I quite enjoyed the eye candy. But, negatives now, again, Nanina. The crazy faux rape scene when Nanina's strapped to the thing and begs for her life way too realistically for a kids show. It's so inappropriate. Just really inappropriate, and it totally undid the positive argument I just mentioned a moment ago. Next negative bullet point. The finer points of the plot. Yes, what I meant by that is, what exactly are they transferring here? Is it life energy? Is it intelligence? Is it artistry? Is it health and beauty? Is it morality? And is morality meant to be a consequence or a side effect of intellect? Which is pretty much what the Doctor hints at, but surely that can't be the case even within the framework of the serial, because at a certain point in the narrative, the so-called savages who have practically zero intellect display a basic understanding of ethics. Not Raquel Welch, Nanina, for example, she tends to exhaust his wounds, right? And Beanie Magoo and Win Duffy don't hurt Doc and Co. because Stumbly Guy tells them that they're kind people. So yeah, that's a negative because it's entirely glossed over. Next bullet point, the artificial atmosphere. Okay, I'm referring specifically to the fake atmosphere inside the city, which is never mentioned again, but really what I mean to say here is the myriad yetis of this story. It's not just the atmosphere. There are so many things here that are left unexplored. There are so many yetis in this story. The artificial atmosphere, the fate of Avon and Flower, the fact that they're never allowed outside the city, the fact that Doc and Co are suddenly considered gods by the cavemen, and you know what? Another favorite element to pick up on Who Back When, Chekhov's gun, or in this case, dagger. I was personally a little bit disappointed to find that the dagger never made a reappearance in this serial. Yeah, too many things left unexplained. Final bullet points. This probably comes as no surprise. Stevesy leaving. Why does he have to leave? Why like this? I mean, I don't dislike Steven. And I think he made for a great, slightly younger, more alpha companion, especially in the absence of Ian Chesterton, even though, admittedly, I much preferred Ian. But I don't feel that he had enough of a run on the show, not even to leave much of an impression, or not enough to leave a solid enough impression. Is this really it? He was hardly on the show, and unfortunately he has to leave at the end of an episode in which, although admittedly he was pretty heroic, he still didn't get to solve any problems. And what makes him more suitable as a diplomatic liaison for the cavemen and the city dwellers? Nothing. Literally nothing. The city dwellers have practically not interacted with him at all. In fact, he really only interacted with two of them, verbally, and those two were court-martialed or killed or whatever, and we never found out what happened to them afterwards. And the rest he just fought with using actual freaking future weapons, right? So surely they can't think he's that great. And the cavemen apparently think he's a god, so how would he be a suitable diplomatic counsel for them? Isn't that abusing his alleged authority a little? Fuck, man. They think you're a god. You shouldn't advise them on anything. You should just appoint someone they think is a mere mortal to do that instead, and then let history run its course. Ugh. Okay, I'm done with this. I've spoken about the serial for like an hour now. I'm gonna give this serial... And it's... I kind of want to say that I still found it really enjoyable, and I wonder if maybe I would have thought it was even better, quote unquote, if it had still been available for us to view properly. So I'm going to say I'm giving it a good 1.6. That's it. Sorry guys, 1.6 for this one. Let's have a listen to some listener minis instead. Listener minis. Okie dokie, so we've got 3 reviews here from our dear listeners, and as per usual, I will read them in chronological order. 2 out of 3, heads up, they're not short. One is very mini though, so I think we're gonna be fine here. I'm expecting greatness. Spoiler alert, this is, well, as I said before, this is the first time I'm reading them. So, here we go. The first one comes from Steven. How you doing, dude? He says, before I referred to The Celestial Toymaker as a favorite of the Hartnell-era stories, after having re-listened to the audiobook of The Savages, I feel forced to amend that statement. At the very least, The Savages may be my favorite William Hartnell story that actually features William Hartnell. Haha, okay, interesting. In fact, I remember you saying something to that effect on Twitter. Yeah. Well, we'll get to his Twitter plug in a moment. Stephen goes on. The main reason for this is because on my second listen, it occurred to me that this serial, more than any other I can think of, highlights how the First Doctor has developed over the course of his run. Perhaps because this episode also features cave people, the question that came to my mind was, Can you imagine the Doctor we met back in An Unearthly Child being as disgusted with the Elders as he was here? Even if he disapproved, would he have tried to lead a revolution on the planet to put an end to it? Or would he have hightailed it back to the TARDIS? The Doctor at the start of the series would have probably been more concerned with letting the Elders stroke his ego or getting off that planet before the Elders' life drain was used on him. Here, the enjoyment of flattery stops as soon as he realizes what's going on, and, if anything, he counts on that life drain happening in order to get one of the Elders to his side. Holy shit, that is a fantastic point. Steve, dude, you fucking nailed it. Yes, you're right. In An Unearthly Child, that very, very first serial, we got to see cavemen, and the Doctor was interacting with them very differently. The only thing I would say is maybe that the cavemen back then, they were far more primitive than these ones. Like, they were actual, honest-to-God, fucking straight-up cavemen. Like, they were real freaking Flintstones, whereas in this case, the cavemen possibly due to... You'll know this probably much better than I do, having listened to the audiobook. But as I said, I got the impression they were cavemen kind of because of the way they were being treated by the Elders. Anyway, alright, perhaps you're going to be getting into this as well. Here we go. Stephen goes on. Another highlight was watching the Elder Jano, so serious when introduced, suddenly take on the mannerisms of the Doctor. Holy shit, yes, you're right. I should have added that to my plus column. That was fantastic. A fun fact I remember that I'm sure JD can confirm is that this was another attempt at replacing or regenerating Hartnell that went unused. Also, while Jano had to be forced to see his actions through the Doctor's eyes to recognize them as wrong, we have the soldier Exos, who actually manages to pull it off entirely on his own with the help of the savage Nanina. Stephen also handled himself well when going up against the soldiers and their light guns. He also got a good, proper and heartfelt farewell from the troop, neither rushed off like Vicky, nor suddenly killed like Katerina or Sarah. Stephen is able to bid his fellow travelers a heartwarming farewell. Yes, you are absolutely right about that. I don't know if I gave that the emphasis that it deserves. And it's so nice. I did mention it's so nice that we actually get the video footage here. Stephen goes on. This serial is also the first to show signs of the Doctor's eventual monumental reputation. The Elders are the first people with no prior connection to the Doctor to show that they are aware of who and what he is. The monk came from the same planet as the Doctor, and the Daleks knew him from prior encounters. The Elders had never seen the Doctor in person, indeed, didn't even know he travelled with companions, but were aware of his travels in time and space. Very true. He goes on. This serial is not without its flaws. I felt there was an early inconsistency with the citizens of the city, as they seemed inclined to keep how they maintained their civilizations a secret, or at least were reluctant to mention it, yet later these same characters seem unable to comprehend why what they're doing is even wrong. It makes one wonder why they would worry about keeping it a secret. Very true, and I made that point as well, Steve. Great minds think alike. He goes on. I also feel like the militant and distrustful second-in-command who hinders the heroes, in this case Edal, is something that's been used in Doctor Who enough times that it ends up feeling like a cliché, with other examples that come to mind being the number 2 monoid in the Ark, very true, and Gaston from the Massacre, yes, very true. Such flaws were not enough to dampen my enjoyment of the story. Listening with the thought of how this shows the Doctor's change over time made me enjoy it even more than I did the first time I listened. I am giving this story a 4.2. Holy sweet buttery Elvis, dude. You have got a huge heart. 4.2? Wow. Okay, you know what? I am curious about the audiobook now. Is it better? You raised some great points, Steve. Fantastic review. Thank you very much. And he adds one little addendum, which is, I believe, in response to something that we discussed on Twitter, Steve. I'm not sure. He says, one last thing I want to mention is another reason I enjoyed the episode, separate from the episode itself. It brought to mind a book written by one of my favorite authors, Terry Pratchett. Any Pratchett fans will probably be able to guess which one I refer to, but to give some detail, the book is called Carpe Jugulum and features the main character, witch Granny Weatherwax, being bitten by a vampire with much the same end results as here with the Doctor and Jano. I can even imagine the Doctor's version of her own line in that story. I have not been savaged, my dear fellow. Oh no, instead you have been doctored. The original line was, I ain't been vampired, you've been weatherwaxed. Well, that's very nice. I haven't read any Pratchett, to be quite honest with you, even though I still have the Colour of Magic on my bedside table. But awesome. Steve Meister, thank you so much for sending in an awesome review. People who are not Steven, follow him on Twitter if you're not already. He is at sgamer82. That's 82, the number. Next up, we have Gallifreyan Buccaneer. Gallifreyan Buccaneer, how are you doing, sir? Gallifreyan Buccaneer goes, The Savages is, according to Doctor Who magazine, the least watched and listened to in all of Who. It's for this reason that I honestly can't be bothered to re-listen to it again. Okay. I listened to the audiobook version about 5 months ago and I can't remember anything much beyond Stephen leaving and some unflattering racial undertones. Okay, alright, so second audiobook reviewer in a row here. He goes on, it's sort of an anti-the Ark in that the Savages are seen to be worthy of leading their own civilization. But then again, they aren't aliens, so of course they are. It's a typical 60s attitude towards the whole thing, but I suppose it is a step in the right direction. Stephen is a very underrated companion and one of favourites. Peter Purvis plays him brilliantly, and he always had a backbone to stand against the crotchety First Doctor. Pity he didn't have a better story to leave, but considering Dodo's departure in the next serial, spoiler alert, dude, maybe it's a good thing. The Savages, it's not bad, it's just dull, which is the worst crime? And Gallifreyan Buccaneer gives this 0.8. Holy crap, dude. We have, we've got 4.2, we've got 0.8, and I am somewhere there in the middle. Actually, no, I'm not in the middle. I'm closer to you, Gallifreyan Buccaneer. You have, however, given it exactly half of what I gave it. Fantastic. Thank you very much for sending this in, Alan. We are totally on the same page as far as Peter Purvis is concerned. I like your reference to the Ark as well. People who are not Gallifreyan Buccaneer, follow him on Twitter. He is at Alan Trussler. That is Trussler with 2 S's. And next up, we have Kyle Rath. Kyle, Dude Meister, how you doing? All rad? All well? All rocking? I certainly freaking hope so. Kyle goes. Engage reconstruction mode. Reconstruction mode engaged. Morality is... Yep, we are exactly on the same page here. He starts off by saying, morality is in the blood, or life essence, whichever gets your vibrator reacting. Arriving on an unnamed, seemingly idyllic planet, the Doctor, Stephen and Dodo encounter 2 groups living at odds with each other. Again, the first group, viewed initially at a distance, are the Savages, a tribe of suppressed yet compassionate humanoids eking out life amid the wilderness. The second, the Elders, live within comfortable and highly technological surroundings, keeping the rabble at bay, because being higher on the local food chain means they know better. The Elders have apparently been tracking the Doctor, the traveller from beyond time, through time and space, knowing he would one day visit. In brackets, Kyle adds, no explanation given. All caps, by the way. Nice one. He goes on, when the leader of the Elders, Jano, steals some of the Doctor's life essence, he is imbued with the Doctor's morality and begins to change his ways. Despite the reconstruction, this is a somewhat dark yet straightforward morality tale, not out of place for the First Doctor. Specifically, the idea that our morality, our conscientiousness, can be contained within our genes and even shared via transfusions, either literally or figuratively. It acts as a positive spiritual precursor to stories where transplant patients receive parts from a serial killer and begin uncontrollably attacking innocent victims. Mind blown. That is a fantastic comparison. Yes, you are totally right. Okay, Kyle goes on. While this serial was important for being the first without individual episode titles, it also marks the departure of Peter Purvis as Stephen, who stays behind to lead the now mixed bag of Elders and Savages. In addition, the attack on the Doctor via the light beam life essence removal system, patent pending, was another in a series of increasing number of causes which will have long-lasting effects through the next 2 serials. And indeed, the rest of the show's history. Spoiler alert, regeneration. Something to mention, every time the god Exorc was mentioned or shown, I couldn't help but think of exorcism, from the Greek, exorkismos, binding by oath. Oh, very interesting. I apologize if I just butchered the pronunciation there. Interesting fact there, thanks man. And here goes on, which is the practice of evicting demons or other spiritual entities from a person or an area they are believed to have possessed. Yeah, I see where you're going with this. He goes on, the life essence is effectively exorcised from its hosts, though without the nefarious connotations. Likely not related, but I thought it was interesting. It is interesting. I think that's a great point. You also have, like, the Doctor's morality in a way possessing Jano, right? Like, he is suddenly possessed with him. Nice. Yet another case of great minds. Alright. He concludes, finally, the score, 2.5 out of 5. It's always difficult scoring recons, missing the very important parts of the dramatic portrayal and emotional inference, so I try to grade them as if they are radio dramas with accompanying pictures. This serial wasn't too bad, not too hot, not too cold, but still somewhat pedestrian in content and storytelling. Frederick Jaeger took acting lessons from William Hartnell to nail down those elements of the First Doctor's mannerisms, and it was a quaint, if curious method to show in transference. I also had no idea that the Doctor left so much of his DNA lying about the universe. First a tooth, now some of his life essence. Where will it stop? Having written this before the broadcast of The Gunfighters episode, this bit of pan-global mind-melding is for Ponken. Ooh, interesting. Okay, he goes on. Imagine if an unscrupulous ne'er-do-well rogue Time Lord or lady wished to do ill towards the universe by collecting the bits of the Doctor throughout time and made a patchwork clone to do his or her own bidding. No, that's too crazy. I like where you're going with this. Thank you so much. I like it. I also have a feeling that maybe we're gonna see a little bit of an audiobook trailer hinting at something like that in the future. What do we have your blessing to do that, Kyle? I think that sounds like an awesome idea. Thank you so much for sending this review in, dude. As always, awesome, and there's some fantastic trivia in there as well. Mr. Jaeger, I hadn't even made a note of his name. Now I have. Thanks, man. That's down to you. I don't have to go into the finer points here. People who have listened to this review, they already know where you've echoed my sentiment and where I am inclined to echo yours. People who are not Kyle Rath, what are you doing with your Twitter accounts? They are largely there in order for you to follow this man on Twitter. Do so. Post haste. He is at Sinister Super Spy. That is super without any vowels. Okie dokie, that concludes this episode of Who Back When, a Doctor Who podcast. Thank you so much for listening, ladies and gentlemen. If you are somehow unaware of this fact, but you've still listened this far, you should know that most episodes of Who Back When are not solo missions. They are recorded in conversation. I normally sit down with one or two other people and we talk about a serial or an audiobook or an episode in question, and that's what we do. It's banter. It's not just a monologue. So if you didn't know this, you should check it out. WhoBackWhen.com. We review shit tons of Who. If you want to follow me on Twitter, you can do so. I am at Ponken. Here's a soundbite of JD singing how you spell that.
Ponken, Ponken.
Thanks, JD. Until the next time I invade your earballs, have a great time. Rock on, be rad and excellent to each other. Thanks again for listening. Ciao. Kablamo! Did you enjoy the show? Then please do what the cosmos compels you to and spread the gospel of Who Back When. Like us on Facebook. That's facebook.com/WhoBackWhen, all in one word. Are you on Google+? Okay, then find us on Google+. That's plus Who Back When, and when you do, tell us why you're on Google+. Who Back When just got its very own Twitter account, so give us a follow. You guessed it, that's at Who Back When, all in one word. Check us out on SoundCloud, vote us up on Reddit, listen to us on Stitcher, and head on over to our website, whobackwen.com, where you can leave a comment, submit a review of your own, and peruse our visual index of aliens, monsters, and more, which increases in kablamos with every episode. And lastly, give us a rating and review on iTunes. Not only would it make us super chuffed, and it really would, but as thanks, we will transmigrate your iTunes nom de plume into the credit list of trailers for fake Doctor Who audiobooks produced by Who Back When. Have a poke around our bonus episodes to make more sense of that. That's it. Rock on and be rad and excellent to each other. Catch your earballs in our next classic Who review, new Who review, or still funny audio Who review. Ciao.
Who Back When?